Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia with RedmondMag.com, and I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us today. The topic of today's webcast is Digital Resiliency, Strategies for Application Infrastructure in a Hybrid Cloud World, and we are so thankful to have it sponsored by A10 Networks. But before we begin, I'd like to cover a few important housekeeping details. We will have a Q&A session today at the end of today's presentation, so do not hesitate to pop your questions into the audience Q&A box. We'll take those right at the end. Additionally, A10 Networks has provided some phenomenal resources which correspond with today's event. So take a moment to check those out on your resources list on the right-hand side of your screen. Finally, today's webcast is being recorded, so keep an eye out for a link to rewatch the presentation or share it with a colleague. It should be emailed to you over the next few days. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers. We are in for a phenomenal presentation with these two. First up, we'll hear from Howard M. Cohen, the Senior Resultant at the Tech Channel Partners Results Group. And following Howard, we'll get to hear from Paul Nicholson, Senior Director of Product Marketing of A10 Networks. So like I said, we're in for a really great event today. And with that, I'll pass the time over to Howard to get us started.
Thank you very much, Olivia. This is Howard M. Cohen, and I'm, as Olivia mentioned, I am a Senior Resultant for the Tech Channel Partners Results Group. I've been in the IT channel for 40 years. I actually came in with the IBM DC in August of 1981. Enough about me. We're here today to talk about conquering cloud cost, control, and complexity challenges. Cloud has become pretty much the standard, the way in which we all deliver IT services. As we move more and more to cloud, we try to make it better and better. And of course, with great power comes great responsibility. So we need to figure out how to keep it all under control. There's one word that I'd like to start off with because it's so frequently used, and sometimes I think it's somewhat misunderstood. So to get a definition of it, I've gone to the National Institute of Standards and Technology. If you haven't read their definition of cloud computing, they wrote the original. It's 4 pages long. It is absolutely worth the time invested to read it. It'll give you a much better understanding of what everyone's trying to do with cloud. But one of the words that keep coming up is the word hybrid. And so I looked for their definition, and they say that it's 2 or more distinct cloud infrastructures, public, private, or they list community clouds, that remain unique, but they're bound together by technology. And that's, that's a fair definition. Here's the thing. The way I see it, everything is hybrid. I mean, what isn't hybrid? We're still in the midst of transitioning. Very few companies have gone all the way hybrid. So at the very least, we're a hybrid of on-premises systems and public cloud systems. Maybe a hybrid of on-prem, public, and private cloud even. Maybe even more. Maybe some of us have now moved to multi-cloud. What's the difference? What is the difference between hybrid and multi-cloud? If everything is hybrid, what is multi-cloud? And the hint is that every hybrid is multi-cloud. You have multiple clouds. You may have a few public clouds. You may have a few private clouds that you're using. But every multi-cloud is not hybrid. Okay, multi-cloud denotes that you're using the same infrastructure of cloud. You're using, for example, 3 or 4 public clouds. And one of the great advantages of cloud is that you can integrate various cloud services, bring them together to form a greater system. In fact, today's integrator differs from the original integrator in that in the beginning, we integrated different hardware and different software from various different manufacturers and publishers, and we made better solutions out of them. Today, we're still doing some of that, but more and more we're combining services cloud services, cloud-delivered services from a variety of different cloud providers. And so multi-cloud is used to denote that we're using more than one of the same kind of cloud. So let me give you the grand example. The grand example is Oracle, Azure, and AWS. Okay, they're all similar. They all are hyperscalers. They're huge. They all offer a huge number of services. They offer virtual machines. You can get virtual machines configured the way you want, with the storage you want, the operating system you want, the database engine you want. And then you can just simply use those as you see fit. So once you have multi-cloud, the thing you have to acknowledge is that you need to manage multi-cloud. And that's not simple. It's kind of like when you went from on-prem to cloud. It was different. And when you go to multi-cloud, it's different once again, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. In addition to having multiple hyperscalers, you may also be using the Internet of Things. You may be deploying sensors and switches and controls in all kinds of far-flung places along the edge of the Internet. The Internet is exploding. There are billions upon billions of sensors and controls being deployed all over the planet and elsewhere that are all connected into the global Internet. And that's got a lot of management implications that we could go into in a session all its own. In addition, we're now seeing the advent of 5G, the fifth generation of wireless. This one's going to be somewhat different in that it's supposed to be latency-free. No delays, no burps. So, the jury's out. We'll see if that actually happens. Also, the world is becoming more mobile. So we have to manage our mobile fleet and all the people who are using it and all the applications and data they're using. Of course, all of this needs to be secured. We can't have outsiders getting to our data because they'll corrupt it, steal it, use it, who knows. So security is a critical concern that we have to manage. Another thing that we have to manage, another kind of hybrid network, is a change from the original IPv4 IP addressing scheme to IPv6, going from four clusters of 3 digits each for an 8-bit word, going out to a 128-bit word. That's a huge address, 128. So big change there. And everybody's in the midst of that to some extent. Some haven't begun yet. Some have a hybrid of both. Some may have already finally made it to IPv6. According to ICANN and IANA, the authorities that manage these things, we're supposed to get there by April of 2011. So we're 10 years late. That's not bad. And then finally, we need to manage applications. And managing applications is a huge responsibility. We have to manage the delivery of them. We have to manage the fact that they're hardened so nobody can get into them and use them for their own purposes. There's a lot to do in managing applications alone. So when you look at all of this, it should be comforting to know that you've got all of this to do it with. Uh-oh. Well, the data center's empty. We've moved everything to the cloud. And therein lies the rub. We have to manage more, but we're going to have less on-prem customer premises equipment. For a lot of people, that's a little frustrating. But the good news is that there are solutions, and we'll be reviewing some of those later today. So since we've emptied out the data center, it's vacant, and we've moved everything to the clouds, Azure, Oracle, Amazon, it might be worthwhile to take a look at what we're getting for the move. So some of the advantages of moving everything to cloud over time is that, especially with multi-cloud, you get the choice of the best in class in everything. You look at the three of them. If you have all three connected into your cloud network, you can choose which one you want for Kubernetes, which one you want to manage your DevOps, which ones you want to run your databases on or other applications. You can evaluate all three and decide which one does it best. Of course, best also includes most cost-effective. Which one does it for the best possible price? Now, here's the thing about that, and we'll talk more about it. That's constantly changing. There's competition going on here. These three are, competing against each other all the time. Good for you, because it drives prices down. Of course, when you have all three, there's no way you can get locked into any one vendor. Vendors are very good at making you dependent upon them. They want to be as sticky as they possibly can be, so you just can't get them out of there. Well, now you've got all three, and if one disserves you or fails you, you can move a lot of your applications to another. So that flexibility is fantastic. You can optimize your performance. Whichever one does it best, that's the one you're going to use. This provides you with improved agility and improved flexibility. You can make a lot more decisions here to improve upon the performance of your overall system and to improve upon the price performance of it as well. You also get increased resilience. There's no reason you can't create failover scenarios here, so that if one of the hyperscalers for some reason experiences an outage, which I know that just never happens, but if one of them does experience an outage, you can rig to fail over to another so that you can continue working while they resolve their problems. So that spells increased resilience. Also, each of these three is supposedly infinitely elastic. Well, that means that you get 3 times infinite elasticity. You get a lot. It's very elastic. You can scale however you need to, and simply by requesting more resources. There's no hardware to install. There's nothing to buy. There's nothing to configure. You just tell it what you want, and off you go. There are some situations, you may not have encountered these yet, hopefully, but over time you may, where compliance with local or federal or state law, other regulations, may require you to work in a multi-cloud environment. If it's not happening yet, wait. You also get, and this is interesting, superior security and risk mitigation. Why do I say that? Looking at the 3 companies, Microsoft, Oracle, and Amazon, name 3 bigger companies. You really can't. Name 3 companies with deeper pockets who can invest more in security than these 3 can. And there are very few, if any. So the good news is you benefit from that. They can invest way more than any of us could possibly invest, and so you get the benefit of that. Also, you enjoy the best of innovation. I said before that they're competing on price. They're also competing on technology. They're all trying to be your best choice of cloud provider. And so they're constantly improving upon the way in which they do things. Better database engines, faster, all kinds of new introductions. So you get the benefit of the best of innovation from the best innovators in the industry. Okay, so what are the disadvantages? What's the downside? Well, there is increased management complexity. More clouds, more management. Each of these has its own management consoles, its own management schema. You need to learn them. You need to figure out how you're going to work with them. You need to figure out how you're going to work with them in combination. That will also bring you increased traffic management challenges. But there's, every time a packet moves from one cloud to another, that's a danger zone. That's something that you have to monitor carefully and make sure it's happening correctly. And you have to continue to do that over time. We're living in the era of zero trust. Nothing is trusted. Everything must prove itself. So that's good. Now, the concept of visibility. Anybody who's ever managed any network knows if you can't see it, you can't manage it. So you want to be able to see everything. And in a multi-cloud environment with multiple consoles, multiple schema, you're going to have to look in multiple places to see what's going on. That's difficult. You much prefer to have it all in that proverbial one pane of glass. That would be great. And also, when they're in multiple different places, it's really hard to compare them to each other. Most often you want to see which is performing better, or how is this, a change in this affecting the condition of that. And, that's a context. You're trying to bring everything that's happening into context so you can see everything in the context of everything else. That's difficult when you're checking multiple consoles all the time to do that. You'd much prefer to bring it all together. We're also living in a time where it's no longer enough to be monitoring and managing. It's got to be really one thing. You've got to be very rapid in your ability to locate an anomaly, identify what it is and what's causing it, and resolve it right then and there. There's no time to wait. We're moving at the speed of light, and we've got to manage at the speed of light. So your tooling has to be able to see where it is, see what it is, and know how to fix it right then and there. However, you're trying to do that while juggling multiple management consoles. Very tricky, very difficult. You also have the interesting challenge of trying to load balance, not just between various engines and various storage, but also between multiple clouds. And you can. You're able to balance your load, but it's going to take some learning. It's going to take some sophistication. So it's somewhat of a disadvantage because it's very difficult. I'm sure it'll get easier very quickly, but we're still living in that time where some of these things are still developing. So you may consider load balancing between clouds to be an advantage. Again, just as the management consoles vary, security varies. Each one has its own specifications. Each one has its own requirements. Each one has its own idiosyncrasies. You have to learn them all. And you have to be able to determine which of them is at the root cause of any particular anomaly. That's challenging. Also, since you have 3 different environments, you need 3 different skill sets. They do not manage identically. They do not operate identically. And so you need people who either know all 3, which are super valuable people, super expensive people, or you need to have enough people to cover all 3 or more. And whichever way you go, it's an expensive proposition. People are a big expense in this environment, and let's hope it stays that way because we want an environment in which people remain in control. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't think about. You want to have a financial manager on your team. Why? Because you need to make sure somebody's keeping track of all the changes that are happening. The prices are changing constantly. And you may have thought that Azure had the most cost effective solution for database engine. And then all of a sudden, Amazon makes this big announcement, or Amazon makes this not so big announcement. Somebody's got to catch it. And somebody's got to, because there's going to be somebody in finance who's watching. And they're going to catch you spending more unnecessarily, even though the price just changed. You want to stay in front of that. You want to make sure that you're using the most cost-effective and the most effective solution possible as you're choosing from the various different clouds. Another thing, and those of you who purchase from multiple resources, from multiple sources, know that the more you purchase from one source, the better volume discount you get. Well, the same is true here. You can reserve instances and really bring your costs down by doing so. And the more instances you reserve in advance, the better your pricing will be. Well, if you're reserving instances in all three, you're spreading the wealth, which means you may not qualify for all of the available discounts. It's a sacrifice you make to have more flexibility, more agility, so forth. Also, that means that it's very difficult to continuously maintain the utmost cost control. You've got to stay on top of price changes. You've got to stay on top of where the discounts are being lost and determine which is the better way to go. There's a lot of strategic decisions to be made. As I hope you've seen from what we've done so far, it's a complex kind of environment. I can see that we're kind of running out the clock, so I'm going to just jump through and put all four of these up. It's worthwhile to do a SWOT analysis of your cloud environment, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. Standard kind of analysis that we do all over technology. But in terms of strengths, do you have the financial resources? Do you have the right people? Are your applications leveraging
Hey everyone, this is Olivia just jumping in. It looks like we lost Howard's connection. We're going to get him right back and connected with you all and get us joined back going right away. As a friendly reminder, it's a great time to go ahead and pop in your questions in the Q&A. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation, so don't hesitate to take some time to just go ahead and get those going in. Additionally, it's always good to check out those resources in the right-hand side of your screen. You will not want to miss the great resources that A10 was kind enough to provide. And we'll just give one more moment for Howard. And then if we can always jump into Paul to Paul, let's go ahead and jump into your presentation, then we can jump back to Howard to finish his out maybe a little bit later before we go into the Q&A.
No problem. So you were demonstrating this is really a live webinar, right?
Exactly.
All right. So, yeah, I'll jump into it because I think Howard made a lot of his good points and he was towards the end anyway. So I'm Paul Nicholson at A10 Networks, and I'm going to be talking about digital resiliency and how that helps with digital transformation, which builds on what Howard was talking about earlier. So, first of all, when we look at the definition of this, digital transformation is often referred to as DX. And when we look at digital transformation, it's really about business transformation and how we deliver value to our customers. And if we look at what's been happening over the last 30 years, we know things have been accelerating. And there was a couple of slides recently that Warren Buffett talked about at a Berkshire Hathaway conference where he asked the audience how many of the largest top 20 market cap companies in 1989 were still the top market cap companies today. And the results actually kind of surprised me, which is why I included it in the presentation, because it was basically zero when we looked at it. And, looking at some of these names, some of them are very well known, but we can also see this across multiple industries, this disruption out there, which is basically digital transformation. And some of the very well-known names where this happens to us in our daily life are things like Uber and Netflix. Obviously, Uber's revolutionized transportation. Netflix has revolutionized revolutionized how we consume video content. But from a work point of view, as IT professionals, we can often see that there's other factors out there like Microsoft Azure. If we look at that versus where Microsoft was, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, is very different from a infrastructure software and desktop software type of company into providing these vast cloud data centers Howard was talking about earlier. And then we can also see there's other innovation. Howard also mentioned 5G as one of the major trends. We look at SKT, which recently launched the first commercial 5G services, just edging out some of the others, I think by a day even, in Korea. And they're gaining steam, and these types of services are giving these companies a competitive advantage. So, there's a quote from IDC which I like here, which is, they're actually making an intersection between the idea of digital resiliency and digital transformation out there. And when we look at digital resiliency, this is the concept of how organizations can respond to disruption by using these technologies, which might be part of their digital transformation efforts out there. And when we look at some of the factors out there, some of the disruption we have isn't just from regular business tides, as it were, but it's also from things like COVID-19. I mean, IT teams having to rapidly change to be able to deliver remote access to their employees was obviously a big thing during the early days of the pandemic, and today, I guess, too, right? So with digital resiliency, this basically enables a digital transformation and allows organizations to respond to support the business. And when we look at it from a technology point of view, the things which are really helping with digital resiliency to empower it are things like automation and agility, being able to provide security so that it's predictable in our day-to-day operations, etc. Being able to deliver a superior user experience. We've all been on websites where if it's too slow, we just go somewhere else. If we get to something via a Google search and it doesn't respond, we're probably going to Google again and find something else, right? So being able to deliver that fast user experience is essential for any website, property, and business out there. And then we also have to deal with these change catalysts. And we've already touched on them a little bit because, there's many out there, to be honest. But some of the top ones which are affecting IT systems today are things like the increase in IoT devices. If I look like 10 years back in my own household, and maybe there's a couple of devices which were connected, now it's like 30 odd. Right, and it could be way higher than that because I probably haven't been counting recently. So IoT is a major trend, and we know that these devices are effectively computers out there which could be used for good or nefarious intent. We have the shift to cloud, which Howard was talking extensively about previously. This brings its own set of challenges. And then also we have 5G deployment, which has started, but we're probably not at the apex of this yet. And when we think of 5G, the potential impact on IT systems and security systems can be quite high. And looking at these changes, and these things, how they could impact digital resiliency and digital transformation initiatives, this quote from CIO.com was interesting because what they're noting here is that the increased levels of complexity might be an even more critical issue than the actual systems that we're having to maintain, the legacy systems or, inertia out there to making change. So just this complexity with this multi-cloud environment, if you're running multiple clouds, we know this can be a potential issue. And we did a survey with the BPI network, and we asked the organizations how many clouds they had, and most said 2 or more clouds. And also a follow-up question was, how successful have you been with managing these environments? And only 11% said they were highly successful. So we know there's a lot of work here, and there's a lot of items which could be done to improve how we manage and deliver these clouds. And part of this is because of, it's still fairly new for a lot of organizations. And, managing the security, having the staff to deal with it, and just dealing with this complexity, like it said in the CIO quote, is really going to be the key for a lot of organizations. Now, we're talking about hybrid cloud and complexities here. So what we also want to do is just show what some of the concerns are for some companies, because it really does vary by what type of company you are. So I've got a couple of slides on here from some surveys late last year. And the first one here is for e-commerce. The next one is for finance. But you can see in here that the top three vote getters, as it were, in this multiple selection option are around automation, consistency in delivering the applications in the clouds, consistency in delivering the security services, that centralized management and analytics which go along with it. Now, sure, there's some other here with still quite high scores, but you can see the modernization to be able to control the environment is key. And we see a similar thing when we look at the finance results. So, the top two here are around that. But obviously, in certain verticals, certain things are more important. So when we look at finance, compliance is always top of mind with most of the customers we speak to. So, you can see in the third and fourth places here, we can see concerns about DDoS protection, concerns about upgrading their TLS or transport layer security, or secure socket layer as it's colloquially known nowadays, is one of some of the big security concerns that organizations have. And this is obviously because of some of the upgrades in the technology over the last few years with perfect forward secrecy and elliptical curve encryption, which has become the de facto standard out there. So the big thing we're trying to show here is this concern about the management and being able to see what's going on and being able to control these disparate environments is top of mind in most of the data we receive back. But there are these differences with the security, for example, in the finance vertical. Now, we have these catalysts we talked about before. So really what's driving change for today's IT departments out there? And obviously the shift to cloud is one of them, actually having to deal with that. And then operationalizing that and trying to take away the complexity through automation is one of the key things organizations are trying to do. And then also dealing with this increased number of security threats. Because when we look at IoT devices, they are creating some of the biggest threat vectors we've seen out there, whether they're being co-opted into botnets. We can look recently at the Moiz, M-O-I-Z, botnet. That's actively targeting CVEs, known vulnerabilities in many popular devices out there, D-Links and others, etc. So, being aware of these threats, being able to deal with them automatically is a real key thing to be able to do today. Now, just to also give you some statistics on this, to back up some of the items we were talking about earlier, we talked about user experience. And, in one survey here, it says 46% of users don't revisit poorly performing websites. When we look at 5G, there's going to be a lot more connected devices out there, not just phones, but items which are using that network to communicate back. So one estimate for smartphones is 4.3 billion by 2023, but that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. We also know on the cloud side, 70% of businesses are planning to spend more for that, and also 87% of enterprises have implemented hybrid clouds. So these things are actually reality and not theory today, as I'm sure most of you know. Now, there's a couple of examples we have from our customers of how they're addressing these types of challenges. I'm just going to highlight a couple here, the ones which I've bolded. So, for example, we have an airline in Latin America who is going to a hybrid strategy. And one way they're trying to reduce the complexity is by using the traditional on-premises solutions where it makes sense, but also moving to the Oracle Cloud infrastructure and then using a common management plane between the two. So even though they're operating in two different clouds, they can push the same policies to those clouds and have the same visibility into those clouds. So that's a good example of trying to reduce that complexity out there. We have another company, a technology company in Silicon Valley, which they were looking at, the primary reason they were looking to do an upgrade was because they're looking at updating their TLS decryption environment. So they're doing SSL offload for their websites, but they had to get new equipment to be able to support the new protocols. They're also looking at improving their security so they could provide more robust authentication into those before users get to the app. So they can request authentication before their connection even touches the back-end website by getting that authentication on the application delivery controller, which can just eliminate a whole series of threats because you're not even talking to the back-end application. But one of the reasons they selected our company for the upgrade over the competitor was we actually had a containerized solution with the same management interface as the hardware solutions, as the hypervisor-based editions, and containerized for their future plans. So again, they were looking at how could they simplify their environment for the future. Another one we have, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on a relevant slide, is a retail customer who needed, and in this case, they were looking at one of our security solutions. But what they wanted to do was replace all the different pizza boxes they had for a particular solution, and they basically decided to go with a hardware platform with a hypervisor-based solution where they could spin up, for example, up to 8. Technically, they could do more, but it's recommended 8, up to 8 different instances of the software they needed. So that way they didn't have to go and buy a new server for every single deployment of the infrastructure application they were deploying out there. So you can see there's organizations are looking at how they're trying to simplify these environments. And when we look at these, let's actually also delve into some of the top trends we're seeing in the hybrid environment for these organizations, which are kind of touched on that last slide. So the first one is leveraging the hybrid cloud effectively. The challenge on here is, as Howard was saying earlier, is there's these applications is disparate. They have different features, they have different functionality, they require people to learn them. You need experts in different things. So trying to reduce that complexity is key because you can reduce the number of staff you need, so it can reduce the amount of training you need to do and help with those operational complexities, which obviously in an IT department, you're going to have some people who are very experienced, some people who are less experienced. So just trying to reduce that is going to reduce human error and those potential issues out there. So the way to deal with this is to basically look at modern application delivery techniques. If you're looking at your web application delivery infrastructure or application delivery infrastructure, and think of the ways where you can simplify it. And it could be from the multi-cloud management and reporting. It could also be through licensing, or it could also be for how you could automate things with APIs out there, which is becoming the new lingua franca of the IT professional today. And we've encompassed some of these changes which you can use to, with modern application delivery infrastructure to be able to achieve this. So these can range from using more flexible licensing where you don't have to get a new PO when you want to use something, say, on a container versus bare metal versus a hypervisor solution versus a cloud marketplace solution from, say, AWS or Azure or whatever it might be, and many others. But the ones I'm going to concentrate on today are the 3 which are bolded in here. So the first one is getting a full secure services stack. So when you move to the cloud, you should not compromise your security or your features when you move to there. The requirements you had for your on-prem solution are just the same as they are in the cloud. So looking at a solution which offers all the right features so you don't get locked into the wrong environment is key. Having centralized management where you can manage the same solution in the cloud, say in AWS or Oracle or on-prem, makes the solution a lot simpler for your team because you can push the same policies out and know that you have that same level of security or you have that same application delivery experience for your end users. The central visibility and reporting obviously ties into this because pushing the policies and having the same security services is one thing, but also having that centralized visibility and reporting and also applying connected intelligence to this is key. So one simple example, which I'll show you a screenshot of later, is where you can visualize what traffic is coming in on a dashboard, but also then use geolocation so that it can automatically, without your manual intervention, show you where you're seeing spikes in traffic. And that could indicate an attack. It could indicate a successful marketing promotion. It could potentially, show a marketing promotion nobody told you about and they should have. So, having that centralized visibility and reporting can help with that digital resiliency, whether it's from a security point of view or responding to legitimate business needs. Now, another one which I briefly just touched on the last slide or so is the continuous integration and continuous delivery. And when we look at this type of solution, we know that automation is key. Automation is going to reduce the human error out there and increase the velocity. We can look at simple examples of, say, IT staff being given specific commands in homegrown management consoles as an example, where maybe the senior infrastructure team wants them to do certain actions, but they don't want to give them full management control. So using APIs to do specific tasks when certain conditions are met is one great example. But it could be a lot more complicated elements as well, from gathering reporting through to doing procedures related to whatever challenges happened on that given day. So that's one thing from an IT point of view. Also, we know that the dev teams out there who are actually pushing code could be pushing 10, 20, 30, 100 updates a day out to their website to support the business out there. So being able to match the infrastructure to the website velocity is very key for a lot of organizations. That way they can also spin up and spin down services as they need to meet whatever demand, and also control costs in cloud environments as well. Now, I'll give you an example of this, which is around hybrid cloud management and operational flexibility. And this was a customer of ours, Delta Dental, and I love the quote on here, which is, we like to work smarter, not harder. They modernized their application delivery environment and basically wanted to give a single pane of glass and management, and also overcome automation challenges which they had within their organization. And this was the IT team. They had their DevOps team, which was running the website, serving millions of subscribers, which were pushing out codes very frequently. So, the dilemma there was, how do you actually help empower the DevOps team on a day-to-day basis, but also make sure you keep your IT infrastructure for your regular applications going at the same time. So they upgraded their application delivery environment, but they also deployed the A10 Harmony controller to help them with this. And the difference with having the Harmony controller, which was not in the environment before, was it helped give increased agility to the DevOps team, because they could actually go into a console and have a partition view of what's going on and see what was happening after they did a code push. So they could do that update to the content on the website, and then they could see if there's any errors. They could see if there was a 404 page not found error, in near real time. So it basically took out the errors from there, but it also showed when they were being successful, or they saw a better result from a code push in a very quick manner. So this obviously helps that digital resiliency out there, and it took away the manual side of it. So I thought this was a very good example. And one thing I also wanted to show, just to make this bring it to a more real level, visceral level, was just a couple of screenshots from this type of solution, because we're talking about modernizing the environment and the infrastructure. And if you look back, say, 5, even 6 years ago, typically when you looked at the load balancing or application delivery environment, you could just see the number of connections coming into a web server, and it wasn't that useful, and it was very hard to troubleshoot. People could blame the load balancer, and you couldn't really defend yourself very easily without a lot of log digging, etc. Now there's the tools out there where this information is presented to you, and you could rapidly drill down into it, and also information is overlaid on it to make life easier for you. So, for example, you can see the map here, which I was referring to earlier, and we can light up areas depending on what's happening out there. And if you see an area, you can double click on it and drill down into that area to see what's going on. You can even see down to the page level, right, of what's going on. So which object is creating a particular occurrence in the dashboard, right, which is very different from just the connection counts, which you used to see in the past. And when you go to these environments like Azure or Oracle, and also you have bare metal and containerized environments, being able to have this at your fingertips is very, very powerful. The other thing, Howard mentioned this earlier as well, is zero trust. And when we look at zero trust, I mean, back in the day, I used to say trust but verify, and the trust thing was very important because when you let someone do something without trusting them with a particular policy. But, I think what's got much better mindshare right now is this idea of zero trust, which is a similar type of concept, which is under the maxim, never trust, always verify. And the idea here is to remove implicit trust for anything in the network, and that the perimeter has disappeared. So every device, user, network, application flow needs to be secured, and excessive privileges and threat vectors need to be removed. And the nice thing about this is it's not a product, it's a concept, it's an idea, right? It's a model. So, and I think it's one which in cybersecurity, a lot of people can easily grasp, and that's a big thing to get adoption of security principles, if people can understand what you're doing and support you in doing that. So, in this particular statistic we have from a survey, 59% of organizations were deploying a zero trust strategy. So we know it's very popular today. So what I wanted to do was just show a couple of examples on here on how you can do it, because often people talk about the network access component and authentication components, which are very important. But there's also other ways that you can improve the security. So I talked about the retailer example earlier, about how they use a hypervisor-based environment to reduce their cost of operations, because within one device they could have what would previously have 8 different one rack unit appliances in their data center. But also this type of solution helps give strong isolation to an organization out there. So we partnered with Dell. Dell is an OEM partner of ours, where we have our Thunder MVP platform, and this uses Dell hardware, and you can even use the Dell Open Manager components in here, etc. But we can then layer on in the hypervisor up to 8 different infrastructure appliances. So it could be application delivery, it could be TLS decryption appliances to decrypt traffic for security devices. It could be carrier grade NAT functionality to extend IPv4 and help bridge to IPv6. So very, very flexible. And in this particular example, the organization wanted to deploy this and reduce their costs and have that centralized management. So they basically enhanced their CISO's zero trust security model by deploying this and running multiple different appliances on it, yet still linking into their Dell standardized environment and being able to use their standard management tools out there. So it's a very elegant solution to reduce that complexity and also reduce cost, and then deliver the solution in a simple day-to-day fashion. One other thing I also want to talk about, when we talk about zero trust, it is also protecting flows in the network, just not just the authentication piece. And when we look at this, there's so much traffic going on, and when we see 5G, IoT, and all these other things going on, trying to find attacks can be like a needle in a haystack. So we really need to think differently on how we secure things. And one of the biggest things to me, which makes the most sense, is looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to identify attacks which are coming in. So we have a solution called zero-day automated protection, where we look at multiple different characteristics of traffic, and then we can create filters, if the feature's turned on, to block these unknown attacks in a very quick manner. And we've had some of the largest gaming companies in the world who use us who have come back and blocked 50 million packet per second attacks multiple times with these type of things, up to 200 gigabits per second in one case. I'm actively thinking on here. But the idea of this is that you use artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to find things which would, could be done manually, but in reality it wouldn't have been done because there's too much to do. So that ended those top four elements, but as we know, technology is always evolving. So there's always other things on the horizon. People are looking at Kubernetes right now. People are looking at deploying Capture for enterprise solutions, just like you see in the standard public sites to verify users. So there's a lot of other factors out there as well. Now, with that, I'll just wrap up and just give a very short overview of A10 so we can go to questions. But with A10, we have industry-leading solutions in 4 different areas, which is application delivery, 5G security, including carrier-grade NAT, DDoS protection with our Thunder TPS appliance, and then traffic visibility for example, like Digital Guardian or Cisco devices, etc. And this is all wrapped up with automation and control with our A10 Harmony controller, which is available for our products. And when we look at our customer base, it's a who's who of some of the largest organizations out there. Microsoft is one of our biggest customers. We have 8 of the top 12 gaming companies who use us as an example, and then a slew of enterprises you can see on here, from Morgan Stanley to Caesars to University of California, etc. And just to wrap this up, we started off talking about digital transformation and digital resiliency. And digital resiliency really, to me, is something which can make organizations be successful. Digital transformation might be one of those things which there might be some longer term roadmaps. Digital resiliency is obviously one of those things you have to respond to in the near term. So we always say to organizations is evaluate these modernization techniques and see how they can help you and relieve pain points you have for your business. The other thing is also, because technology is always changing, is to plan for these technology shifts. Some you have to do now, like the TLS decryption technologies, you have to do now, otherwise you're going to suffer consequences like Google ranks organizations who aren't using the latest encryption techniques lower than others in Google searches, as an example. But some of the other technologies might require a longer horizon if you're moving to Kubernetes or some of the cloud environments, or you have a greater plan out there. So coming up with that roadmap for yourself is obviously an important thing. So with that, I think we have Howard back. Let me pass it.
Hello, Paul. Thank you. And thank you for jumping. Good news, it happened at the best possible time. I don't know what shut down, but I was on my last slide, and quite frankly, my last slide was boring. So it's good that you jumped in when you did, and I appreciate it. We are back with some questions. The first one, somebody wanted to hear a little more granularity about your analytics console.
Okay, yeah. So with the analytics out there, I think I covered it towards the end there, but the difference from what we had before is, literally there was, if we're really honest, it wasn't really analytics. It was just reporting on connection counts. Now there's a convergence of a couple of different things in the analytics console. One, you can connect into multiple different form factors. You can connect into multiple different clouds. You can then also drill down and get a lot more information down to the page level, and not just the connection count, which is what you traditionally associate with the application delivery controller and the load balancing platform. And then finally, it's that connected intelligence where we can leverage other pieces of technology to give more interesting results out there. And what I mean, the best example I gave earlier is one of the simpler ones is that geolocation, so that on a map you can actually see where your connections are coming from. Like in our DDoS solution, you can look at the console in there, and if you suddenly see there's a lot of traffic coming from Russia and you're a community college in New Mexico, there's probably something wrong, right? Unless someone's promoting and trying to get students from there, right?
Absolutely. Olivia, we just have a question. I know you mentioned that the recording of this session will be available. Will the slides be available?
Yes, we can definitely shoot over the slides with the recording, so everyone has those for reference.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We just got that question. Another question that just popped up near the end, Paul, was about DDoS. Apparently, somebody wanted to hear more about it. Wanted you to expand upon your DDoS.
Yeah, so I skimmed over that one a little bit, so that question makes sense. So when we look at DDoS protection, it is a I won't say multi-device, but all infrastructure solutions probably should have some type of DDoS protection. Like our carrier-grade NAT protection has protection for DDoS, for IPv4 pools in it. DDoS protection specifically for that. The application delivery controller has some built-in DDoS protection elements. But when you're really managing a large network, you want to do network-wide protection, and that's where our Thunder TPS solution comes in, which is a dedicated solution for it. So I talked about artificial intelligence and machine learning, which I think is one of the big innovations, but there's also things in there where you can have a threat intelligence solution, which actually comes with our product, where we have up to over 50 different sources, where we create lists where you can block things like botnet drones, etc. So known bad IPs or bad actors can be blocked automatically, which just makes sense. And then we can escalate through a policy depending if you're in peacetime or if you're in wartime, obviously going into wartime out there. And it can be very effective. We had one hosting provider, LeaseWeb, in Holland, who they implemented the solution and they actually said 11% of their support tickets went down. So DDoS is a real problem for a lot of organizations, and looking at it network-wide is really the way a lot of the larger organizations do today.
Excellent. Okay, one more question. You mentioned Kubernetes. Somebody's asking if you support Kubernetes, and what other non-hardware options do you offer?
Yeah, I mean, we don't care if someone buys hardware or software, to be honest, because it's basically the solution you're trying to deliver. So, we have our hardware appliances, which are very popular. Obviously, it's turnkey and it's traditional. But we also have versions which the different form factors include hypervisor versions from Red Hat to VMware, ESXi, etc., bare metal options, containerized versions, and then cloud marketplace versions with Azure, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, AWS. So it's the same software running on each one of those instances. So that way, for example, like the Harmony controller, the APIs, and things of that nature can support all of those. And we do support, Docker-based containers, and you can manage those with Kubernetes as well. So definitely an option, and a lot of organizations are looking at those coming up as well.
Excellent. Paul, I want to thank you. This has been a great, very informative session, and I think you've offered our audience some terrific solutions to the kinds of problems I was talking about. Also, I just want to point out we have an awesome audience, and several members of the audience popped a thank you to you into the question and answer console. So on behalf of all of us here at Redmond Mag and for A10, thank you very much for that. You're very, very welcome. If you have ideas for future sessions, we'd love to hear from you. We try to bring as much value as we can every time. And with that, we'll say have a good rest of the day. And Olivia, I'll hand it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Howard and Paul, for being with us today. I knew we were in for a great presentation, and you both definitely delivered on just a phenomenal presentation. So we thank you for your time today. And thank you, most importantly, A10 Networks, for sponsoring and making this possible today. We really appreciate it. And everyone, keep an eye out, like we said, for the re-record link so that you can rewatch it or share it with a colleague. I know it was a lot of great info. With that, everyone, have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to catching you on the next one.